The 2020 presidential race is heating up with more Democratic candidates gearing up for part 2 of the first Democratic debate. Former Vice President Joe Biden, Senator Bernie Sanders, and Mayor Pete Buttigieg are among the candidates taking the stage tonight.
Among the topics addressed by the first 10 candidates during last night's first debate, healthcare, immigration, and the economy.
Medicare for all solves that problem. And I understand there are a lot of politicians who say, oh, it's just not possible, we just can't do it. What they're really telling you is they just won't fight for it.
I think we should be the party that keeps what's working and fixes what's broken.
This opioid addiction in our country, we in cities like mine have been seeing how we've tried to arrest our way out of addiction for too long.
Watching that image of Oscar and his daughter Valeria is heartbreaking. It should also piss us all off when somebody comes across the border not to criminalize desperation, to treat that as a civil violation.
For all the American citizens out there who feel you're falling behind, who feel the American dream's not working for you, the immigrants didn't do that to you.
If you go to Guantanamo Bay, there are terrorists that are held that get better health care than those kids that have tried to cross the border in the United States.
If you need a license to drive a car, you should need a license to buy and own a firearm.
We are the first generation to feel the sting of climate change, and we are the last that can do something about it.
Now we are a month away from the Iranians who claim now that they're going to blow the caps on enriching uranium. And this president is literally every single day 10 minutes away from going to war, one tweet away from going to war.
If there was an attack against our troops, then there would have to be a response.
We must begin impeachment now so that we have the facts and the truth, and we follow them as far as they go and as high up as they reach, and we save this democracy.
For a deeper dive into the debate, we want to bring in CBSN political contributor Molly Hooper and CBS News chief Washington correspondent Major Garrett. Welcome.
Good to be with you. Good morning.
Good
morning,
to see you. So I want a quick discussion for our audience about what you and I have been talking about,
Sure.
which is that what we're not going to do here is talk about the theatrics around the debate. We're going to talk about the issues.
Right. After debates, reporters and pundits fall into what I think is a predictable bad space, acting like theater critics. Well, here's who won, in my opinion. That's not our job. Voters will tell us over time who won, and voters will tell us what they noticed and what they want to organize around, what they want to donate to, whose town hall they want to go to that they wouldn't have gone to before. All that plays out in a natural order of things. And what people who evaluate debates should do is let that process go forward and not say, you know what, based on my long analysis of theatrics, so-and-so was theatrically most impressive. No, that's not what this is about. But oftentimes it lends itself to that. And 2016, I think, was a very powerful lesson for anyone who wants to pay attention to it. Voters do not want to be told what to think or what just happened. Let them decide for themselves and then act on that decision. So that's my take on that.
So based on that, when we look at how the candidates delved into the topics and the questions that they were given and how they responded, Molly, who do you think seemed to have a command of the policy issues greater than the other candidates?
Well, now, not being a theater critic, but I do like the theater.
We have this disclaimer now we've got to go through. I apologize.
But Donald Trump's a pretty good showman.
Yes.
You know, he really was. He was entertaining.
And
last
voters
night
responded to that, and that's the continuum I'm talking about. You do something, voters react, then you see it play out.
Okay, so can I just veer into this? Because in terms of the policy, I mean, when you have 30 seconds and, you know, fact checkers checking whatever you're saying, it's hard to say. I mean, in terms of who has the most command of the argument. But going back to this idea of theatrics in the debate, how do you think that last night compared to those debates in 2016 when people tuned in to watch Donald Trump take cracks at his fellow candidates on the rostrums?
Well, so the one big difference in this field is that they're politicians who work within the system. You don't have someone standing up there saying, this entire system is garbage. And I'm the only one here who's willing to tell all of you that the system is garbage, that I'm completely outside of it, I'm untainted by it. You know what? I wrote checks to all these people, or this whole system. Yeah. And I know how corrupt it is. There wasn't anyone last night, I don't think there's anyone tonight who will say, you know what, the whole system is garbage, and I uniquely am the one to call it out and call all of its faults out. That was a unique and powerful position for Trump to take. And very few of his, actually none of his Republican opponents had an ability to argue against that and say, you know what, no, there wasn't that. What was also interesting last night, we talked about the command of the issues. Look, there was a lot of pre-debate analysis. Say, well, no one's going to have a chance to get anything out there. There's not going to be any substance. Wrong. There was plenty of substance last night. Guess what? People can talk substantively briefly.
Yeah.
It can happen.
And
some of them demonstrated that.
You did get a sense of that.
For heck, whether you agree or disagree, Julian Castro jumped deep into the immigration code with a number and everything. And there's all sorts of stories now elevating an issue and driving a conversation. That can happen. So that pre-analysis, forget it. Stop it.
But it did seem like there was a concerted effort to take on Beto O'Rourke.
Certainly by Julian Castro.
Julian Castro and Bill de Blasio calling it. He was the only one that was called out on that stage, and with the exception of Donald Trump, who wasn't called out as much as I had anticipated.
Yeah, you didn't hear a lot about Donald Trump.
So let's talk a little bit about that. And they didn't. They chose to focus on the issue. But I think that what you started to see shaping up was this sort of division between the moderates and the more progressive. And it's something that I think the Democratic Party moving forward is going to have to sort of address. It's one thing to make your way out of the primary. It's another thing to transfer all those promises and everything that you sort of pounded on the desk about to a national election. So I want to get your take on that. I mean, what did you see? Progressive policies during the last election was edgy. It's not so edgy now. It doesn't seem like it.
Not as edgy, but for example, when there was this substantive disagreement about Medicare for all, as it's defined by Elizabeth Warren, which is the elimination of private insurance in this country. And you heard John Delaney say, no, we can't do that. That's not only undoable, it's wrong, it's bad policy. Amy Klobuchar came into the debate along that line, the Delaney line. It's not a good idea, it's bad politics, can't work. And Elizabeth Warren took it straight on and said, you know what, I know people have private insurance, but guess what? It still has high premiums, it still restricts coverage, and the business model of private insurance is maximum premiums, minimal payouts. Now that's an aggressive approach. And if that approach prevails for the Democratic Party, that is a tidal shift for the Democratic Party. For someone who remembers covering all the legislative conversation about the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, back then the radical notion was public option.
That's right.
This skips way over public option and obliterates private insurance in this country. That's a huge thing. It's a substantive issue. Disagreements were real. And I think it's one of the things as a party that believes it has, and 2018 reflected this, an advantage on health care. How you debate it and where you land is vital.
And that's one of those issues where it is like throwing everything out. It is like blowing up the system, so to speak, because you're getting rid of private insurance. And that's one thing that was interesting listening to Amy Klobuchar and how she was couching that argument, talking about pharma and talking about lowering the prescription drug costs, lowering the costs of healthcare full stop, not just dealing with the insurance companies, but getting prescription drug prices down so that if you don't have insurance, you can actually afford to go to the doctor. And that's something that I didn't hear many of the other Democratic candidates talking about. And it's also an issue that you have to work with the other side on. It's not like we're going to go in and get rid of everything and I'm going to fight it and I'm going to fight it because I'm the only one who can. It's more like we're going to work with the other side and we're going to improve the system we have.
Why do you suppose they did avoid sort of calling out Donald Trump aggressively, considering that that's one of the things that Democratic voters say they're interested in, and they want a candidate who they believe can beat the president in a national election?
I think they assumed it's a given, and their time allotted was precious, and therefore don't dilute your precious time with something that's a given.
So then do you think,
that's a strategic approach all of them took. Right. I was surprised a bit by it. I thought there would be a little bit more aggression about Donald Trump and more personalization of it and the stakes involved. Yeah. There were some glancing references to that, but I think they said, I've got limited time, it's going to be about me, biography, introduce, project.
So in watching their campaigning thus far, many of them have chosen to stay away from a direct attack on Donald Trump. I just thought it was because maybe they didn't want him punching back, tweeting about him, making up a nickname. I don't know. But except for Biden. Right? So he's going to be on stage tonight, right? And his big thing is, I can beat that guy. So I got to ask you, do you think that might be a misstep for him if he uses his time to say, I can beat Donald Trump? Because so far, it's actually been helping him.
Well, we do know his record, though, unlike Tim Ryan.
But if you look at Donald Trump, who is Donald Trump? If you look at Democrats, what do they see the problem as? Is the problem the system? Like healthcare? Is it the system, or is the problem that Donald Trump is the president? In that if Joe Biden becomes the president, I can work with Republicans. I can get things done in Washington, D.C. I can work within the system. Donald Trump does not work within the system. And so, some Democrats are saying, well, if we go against him, then we're saying that we can work within Washington. You know, is the problem bigger than just the divide in Congress? You know, or is it Donald Trump? And so how do they work with that?
So to that point, I want to play a bit of sound on one question that everybody seemed to struggle trying to answer. They were asked how they would get their policy proposals past Mitch McConnell. Take a look.
Do you have a plan to deal with Mitch McConnell?
I do. We are a democracy, and the way a democracy is supposed to work is the will of the people matters.
There's a political solution that we have to come to grips with. If the Democratic Party would stop acting like the party of the elites and be the party of working people again and go into states, including red states, to convince people we're on their side.
By taking away the filibuster from Mitch McConnell to start with, we have to do that.
If you want to beat Mitch McConnell, this better be a working class party if you want to go into Kentucky and take his rear end out. And if you want to take Lindsey Graham out, you got to have a blue collar party that can go into the textile communities in South Carolina.
So what was striking about that is I thought that last answer was probably the one that makes the most sense. If you don't think that you can get your policy proposals past the Senate Majority Leader, get rid of him in the Senate. But it was interesting. I think Governor Inslee said, well, you got to take away the filibuster. Well, he's the Majority Leader. He can only take it away if he so chooses.
From himself. Or now, what is fascinating about this conversation, and we'll get a little weedy here just for a second. Mitch McConnell regards himself as a Senate institutionalist. Many accuse him of breaking some of the most important institutional norms of the Senate, but we'll deal with that in a second. As an institutionalist, he has resisted President Trump's constant hectoring on Twitter to abolish the legislative filibuster, that 60-vote threshold, to ram the Trump agenda through. Okay? Mitch McConnell has resisted that. He could do it at this president's bidding, but he hasn't. That's probably one of the last remaining areas of deep friction between this White House and the Senate Majority Leader. Then you have Democrats now saying we need to get rid of Mitch McConnell's filibuster. Wait a minute, he's protecting the minority rights to use that 60-vote threshold. Even so, he has become kind of a pariah because what happens? We have a House Democratic majority, and the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, says, you passed that bill, good for you. That's so nice. Here it comes to die because I'm not even bringing it up. This is how the legislative process either does or doesn't work. Highlighting it creates a deeper debate about what the institutional norms are and how much Mitch McConnell is either respecting or disrespecting.
Well, and the issue is, if the Democrats do take the Senate, Elizabeth Warren might have to be fighting with Chuck Schumer.
Right.
And the Democrats.
That's
but,
right.
you know, I mean, and that's the issue, having to deal with, like Donald Trump, dealing with Mitch McConnell as the Senate Majority Leader. It's tough. So, yeah, that was very interesting.
And what I thought was interesting about that clip, also in the context of Elizabeth Warren, all she said was, the question, do you have a plan for that? I do.
I know.
Why is that an applause line?
Huge applause line.
Why is that an applause line? Because she's already, in the last 3 to 6, maybe 9, 12 weeks, carved out this place for, I have a plan. Mm-hmm. And just I do became synonymous, those two words, with what she's sort of staked out.
Right.
And that's a good place to be in politics, when you can do something, refer to it only briefly, and it already has a pre-existing comprehension. Mm-hmm. That is important for her.
I came away thinking
because I never thought I do would be an applause line.
No, I know, but
except at weddings.
But that made me think that that's why she is one of the front runners, because over the course of the last couple of weeks, she has staked out this position, and she has not veered from it at all.
No, she hasn't
not a front runner yet, but gaining ground
in the top 5, right?
And closing.
Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah.
She hasn't catapulted ahead of anyone, but she's gaining ground and developing momentum.
Seems that she can say, "Look, I can play in the Bernie space, and I can play that Bernie space better than Bernie can."
That's right. And you know, Democrats that I've talked to on Capitol Hill who are looking at the political landscape, they want those voters, those Democrats who voted for Trump last go around. They want them back. They really do. And they also want the suburban Republicans who don't like Donald Trump. And so by going out and shopping their plans and not necessarily mentioning Donald Trump, thereby eliciting a glass-eyed response. They're hoping to get through that.
Molly, Major Molly, take that show on the road.
Really
got a ring to it.
Really got a ring to it.
Thank you very much.